That's how infinitely precious each one is to God, and how little God cares about the ego stuff, the small potatoes stuff, the you think you're so important to God stuff. God cares for the least, the last, the lost, the littlest, and for each of us equally, whether we go by the name of Christ or not. Clearly God's intention is that none stumble, but all be invited in. Because then Jesus goes on, if your hand causes stumbling, our hands, that which we do, cut it off. It's more important that none stumble. If your foot, the where we're going, what we're doing when we're up on our feet and moving around in the world, if our feet causes stumbling, better to cut it off. If your eye, that which we observe, that which we take in, that which we participate in our dialogue, in our conversations, in our thinking, if that causes stumbling, pluck it out, because better you be one-eyed than that you lead others into pain. Jesus cannot be any plainer, friends. Put yourself aside for the greater good of the community. And not only for the greater good, put yourself aside for the least in the community, for the newest among us, for the oddest among us, for the most difficult among us. Jesus couldn't be any clearer, and he says it over and over. It is about all of us, from that which we consider the least useful to the one who thinks they're the most important. It is about all of us. And then Jesus ends this passage with these cryptic kind of words about being salt and about the fact that we will be salted. And so I ask you to think briefly about salt in that day and time, because salt was what you used to preserve meat and fish. And so I think Jesus is saying we have to preserve the holiness of each one. Be salted. Salt is also so precious a commodity that sharing it with another was an act of incredible generosity. And so, of course, Jesus says, be at peace with one another. Be salty, share, because like the manna, it won't run out. This precious commodity of sacred honoring needs to be shared. And we also know that in that day and time, and perhaps even now, salt on a wound, oh yeah, very painful, but often necessary for the healing. Be salty. If there is wounding, let it be about purging and cleansing in order that once again, the holiness of each and all might be honored. Friends, again, always, consistently, week in and week out, God is still speaking to us from this holy book. Continuing to be St. Peter's United Church of Christ is of no importance to God. God could care less about names, labels, denominations, structures. Continuing to be a community of people, drawn together by God's Spirit, caring for one another and the larger community, in order to provide a cup of water, a box of food, a tank of gas, a safe place to come in from the craziness of the world, friendship, place for children, to be a community large enough to receive all comers with all manner of needs. Oh yeah, that matters to God. The whining and complaining, we could kind of leave that back in the wilderness. The pointing fingers because that person isn't doing it right, or that person's not one of us. Clearly Scripture says can leave that thinking at the door too, because this is about all of us. It's a very serious matter to God, as we hear from Jesus, that we do this honoring of one another. Cut off the offending part of yourself, Jesus says. And so maybe we all are walking around a little maimed, a little one-handed or one-eyed. It shows that we're mindful of this important ministry we're in. Salty, 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 Jesus says. Risk it all, Esther says. Perhaps we have been placed here on Highway 66 in Parker Settlement for just such a time as this. Thanks.